In 1806, the British transported the first boatload of coolies to Trinidad. Now, coolies were essentially unskilled workers who were largely from India and China, and they were sent over to the New World predominantly, especially places like Peru and Cuba, to bolster up the workforce when slavery was abolished. But the trade only really kicked off after the Opium Wars. But Britain really only dominated the trade for the next few years, and that's because they were trying to keep good relations with China, and China was very protective over its citizens abroad. So when it became apparent that the Cubans and Peruvians were mistreating the coolies, Britain just stepped aside. Now this brings me to Macau, where I am now. So, Macau long had a monopoly over trade in China, but once the British took Hong Kong, they faced stiff competition, especially because Hong Kong was owned by the richest nation on earth. So, Macau jumped on the chance to dominate this coolie trade. In fact, out of the hundreds of thousands of coolies that were exported abroad, about half of them came through Macau. Now, to explain the coolie trade a little bit. Now, they would sign a contract for a fixed amount of time, and that's how long they would go work in the New World. Now, they would work in mines and plantations, so they were more often than not men. But anywhere between 50 and 40% of the coolies would die on the voyage abroad, and very few actually ever made it back to their home country. They were paid, but very little, but given these conditions, even some post-Civil War American states banned importing coolies because they just saw it as a slave trade. So it seems strange that Macau would tarnish its reputation, so to speak, by getting involved in this trade for just a little bit of money. After all, they were eventually pressured to stop the trade by Britain, France, China and the like. But to explain Macau a little bit, for most of its history its population was largely Portuguese or a mix of Portuguese and Chinese, but by 1830 its population of around 12,000 was predominantly Chinese. So it had lost its sort of European culture, and many of its buildings started falling into disrepair. Plus, most reports just say it was a den of prostitution and the likes, and even in 1928, a French geographer said it was a dead city and couldn't be compared to Hong Kong. For a long time, its economy was based on small manufacturing and trade here and there. But during World War II, because it was neutral, tens of thousands of refugees came here, so I think after World War II, its population was around 250,000. And that's when Macau found its new moneymaker, gambling. So, although many nations saw and still see gambling as immoral, for example, there's no real casinos in mainland China, Macau is still willing to, let's say, tarnish its reputation a little bit to make money. And they've made a hell of a lot of money, especially since China opened up in the 80s, so much so that it's taken over Vegas as the largest casino resort in the world. And before anybody comments, I'm not saying that trading people and gambling are on a par morally. I'm just saying Macau has and still seems to do stuff to make money that other nations are not willing to do.